Hold on, let me get comfortable here. Let me get comfortable.
All right, we recording?
Yeah, we've been recording.
We always are recording.
Yeah, every time we check the
Every
time,
time,
we're already
yeah.
recording. No, I've been recording you guys
sip
for the
on
last
this
3
bourbon.
hours.
Sip on this bourbon. Get a
I
little.
haven't stopped for a couple days.
You'd be surprised the
loose
tracks
From
out
El
there.
Toro Studios, brought to you by ElToro.com, the only one-to-one 100% cookie-free IP targeting solution. This is the Straight from the Bull podcast.
Welcome to the third episode of the El Toro Podcast. My name is Kramer Caswell, and as always, I'm sitting here with the David Stadler and DJ Oz, aka Austin Whiteley. What's up, guys?
Yes, sir.
Hey, buddy.
So today we're chatting with the in-house blockchain guru, Jared Paris. Jared, welcome to the El Toro Podcast.
Thanks for having me, guys. I appreciate it.
I think we should get a constant spot for Jared on this show just because he's such a wealth of crypto information.
Yeah,
Maybe
like a crypto minute or
Crypto
something.
Corner.
Yeah, the Crypto Corner with
you go.
Jared Paris.
Yeah,
Gotta
so
get a ring.
back in, what was it? I guess it was like when I first started, I had heard about this little blockchain stuff going on and Bitcoin. I mean, I heard of Bitcoin before. And then everyone was like, oh, you got to talk to Jared about Bitcoin. That guy knows what's up. So I walked over
money.
there like 2 days in. I was like, hey, man, I've heard about this stuff, Bitcoin. Just drops so much knowledge on me. I was like, okay, don't talk to that guy.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, it was funny. We a couple of us were talking about getting more involved in the crypto craze that was going down in, I guess, late summer 2017, early fall.
Yep.
And that was the exact same thing that was told to me. I was like, Jared, you're talking about, Jared over in sales, right? And they're like, yeah, he's super deep into cryptos. He really gets it. So if you're wanting a quick education, I'm just looking to make some hustle bucks, man.
Yep.
So like there's all these people that call themselves experts and crypto consultants, but Jared, in my opinion, is legitimately you're the real deal, man.
Well, I'm glad that what all it takes is basically for me to be following it for the past 4 years. But I appreciate it. I try to be well versed as much as I can and read as much as I can about it. I mean, that's really at the end of the day all you can do.
What kind of sparked your interest when you first? got
Greed,
into-
money,
a
like
good
everyone else.
reason.
I mean, that's kind of the beauty behind it. Is I think it kind of speaks to our most internal basic needs for wanting more of money, of wealth, of everything. I kind of got caught in the craze. There was the initial crash, as people are now going to think of this as the large crypto crash. But back in 2013, there was a equal size run up. Bitcoin was kind of in the spotlight on a much smaller scale, but it ran up from about $200 up to about $1,200, and then initially crashed over the next 2.5 years down to sub $200. So, this has already happened before in the past. It's just become much more ingrained into our culture because this time around it was obviously a much larger number and more people got involved. You had your more retail investor get involved and start to ask that question. So it's been really interesting to watch and see it grow over the number of years now. But literally I just saw the money, followed the money, started reading about it and actually learning about the tech behind it. And that kind of is what got me to really stick around, was getting a better understanding of even how our own currency works, how actual fiat currency works and how money is printed by the Fed and how that's, inflation works. And, a lot of things that we take for granted, we don't really sit down and think about. But it really kind of shined a light on those aspects of something that we all use every day, but really know very little about ultimately. So
when you actually first started talking to me about cryptocurrencies, you made a reference to the use of credit cards back in, I'm guessing, like the 70s and 80s and times like that. And that really resonated with me when you made that kind of analogy. I was hoping you'd kind of let the listeners kind of in on your... Pull back the kimono a bit, man.
yeah,
That's Tyler's favorite saying.
it works so well though. It's interesting. I think if you look at the nature of money, even fiat currency is fairly new in the grand scheme of things. You look back and, going way back in time to gold and precious metals and, different forms of coins that were used for trade and for currency. But ultimately people would trade whatever they needed to for commerce, whether it was livestock or whether it was, a piece of paper that denoted value based on, the government says that something's worth money. But over the past 30 to 40 years, even, we've seen the transition from, hard cash to, a check, right? And then what came after the check was the credit card and the debit card. And really money's become more virtualized over the years already. This is just the next evolution. To me, it's really not a big jump at this point. My debit and credit card is essentially a series of numbers that transfers other numbers from my bank account to another person's bank account to buy something.
Can you explain, because for the people that are listening that don't really have an idea of what blockchain technology is and cryptocurrency, can you kind of explain a little bit in detail? I mean, don't get super granular because I want to take a shot at this bullet bourbon. But, just for the people that are listening that might not know what we're talking about.
Yeah, sure. So we're talking about, truthfully, we're talking about Bitcoin. Bitcoin essentially is a decentralized asset. Blockchain is the moniker given to it. But when you really think about it, when you break it down to its most simplest form, there was really two big evolutions of monetary tracking, if you will, like bookkeeping or ledgers. So before there was a ledger, that had to be created, right? Someone actually literally writing down what was spent from, pluses and minuses from your actual account. And then came, dual entry ledgers, right? So it was between you and a bank, essentially, who was the arbiter of how much money that you actually had on hand, right? So the true, breakthrough with blockchain and cryptocurrencies and Bitcoin is that there's not a central party that ultimately keeps track of that. It's kept track on a completely decentralized database that everybody essentially is keeping track of at the same time. So it's a state-based where if I have, let's say, 5 Bitcoin and I say now that I spent 1 and it's sent it to another wallet address, the entire system records that transaction. So I don't need to have, Bank of America validate that. It's validated against millions of other computers that are processing this giant ledger, quite literally a giant ledger of all the transactions that have ever occurred on the blockchain network or Bitcoin network. And you can literally go back and look at transactions that have happened as early as 2010, back when it was originally invented.
How can you explain to the newer people to it? They're rejecting it because they're used to money backed by gold, because that makes sense because gold is so useful, right? So how can you explain to them computers in a room solving math problems becomes value?
I'm pretty sure is our financial system even backed by gold?
Not anymore.
Not anymore.
But it was. Yeah.
But there's always value in precious metals. That's why people are sitting on silver and gold and things
it's
like that.
It's like why are diamonds worth
Knox.
something? Like, you can put it on a saw blade and it can cut sharp, hard things.
So you got that aliens and gold at the Fort Knox vault, right? Aliens and vault.
Yeah, so, and really there's different rules of thought. There's a lot of different economic theory, game theory behind this. It's not quite that cut and dry, but what the system we're in right now is the Keynesian school of economics, which basically means that we print more money, right? We create inflation, which essentially gets people to spend their money instead of hold it, and you have to invest it and use it. So that money, there's things that can happen, hyperinflation, things of that nature that other countries go through, like Venezuela right now, or several countries in Africa, where literally they have hundreds of millions of a currency that's worth nothing. So there are some issues with that school. It doesn't necessarily work everywhere, but ultimately our money is just guaranteed by the faith of the government, right? The fact that they say that this is worth a legal tender of X amount, and that's just what everyone's socially agreed upon, is that this is something that's valuable. Gold has obviously stood the test of time. You can make things out of it, jewelry. It can be used as commerce, although I don't know of anybody that's used gold to buy anything in the last since I've been alive.
Let me bite this gold coin, make sure it's real.
This bag is silver. I like to buy your cow.
But ultimately, the funny thing is, so again, when you start getting into this world, you start to really look at how you view money, and it changes. It's changed for me, because ultimately it's really what me and you decide as what's valuable or not. Yeah. Same way, like, why do people collect baseball cards? They're valuable because they're rare. Right?
God only knows.
Because they're cool,
or whatever. Yeah, Pokemon cards. There's also different things that you can you can set a value to something just based on whatever you believe it to be worth. But ultimately, it's infinitely more. You can send $1 million to the other half of the world, and spend all of about 10 cents to do that. Whereas try to send $1 million anywhere from the U.S. and you're not going to get very far.
Personally, I hold all my wealth in Pogs as well as Beanie Babies.
Yes.
That's my retirement plan. Yep. So
that was before my time, man.
Yeah, I put my money into VHS.
I think I was like, when the Beanie Baby craze was going on, I think it was like 4 or 5. I used to have like 200 Beanie Babies.
Dude, I knew a kid in high school that sold a bunch of Beanie Babies his senior year, and ended up with like $22,000.
Oh my god!
I was like, oh my god, you're like the Beanie Baby hero.
I'm pretty sure when I hit like 4th, 5th grade when having Beanie Babies wasn't cool anymore. My dad was like, we could just sell them on eBay. And I was like, cool. I think I had like 200 Beanie Babies. I got like $25 for these things.
eBay,
It's dramatic drop.
Can I get $1?
eBay
Yes.
is the magical to old people. It's like I just put it on eBay.
My dad still uses
sells.
eBay. Yeah, people still use that.
Yeah.
I buy some stuff on eBay every now and then.
Yeah, I've never bought anything on eBay.
No, I haven't either. Never. It's weird. It's
But I'm
'cause-
22, so I haven't bought it.
Yeah, it's kind of that's
It's before.
Yeah, it's almost before your time. It was ahead of its time, and you were maybe just past that before you actually.
Well, I
needed
remember my
to
dad buying some
buy
stuff
it.
on eBay. Like we bought a few car. I think we bought like a car. I think he bought a dirt bike.
I bought a
few
car
things.
on eBay.
Yeah. Well, so to get back on this, I wanted to talk to you about this thing that I was reading called the Brave browser. Have you guys seen this? So essentially, it's a browser that's built on blockchain technology. Do you know what I'm talking about, Jared?
Yeah.
So essentially, it uses what they call a basic access token, and it supplies it to publishers and people that are using the browser. I mean, I don't know what I'm talking about here, so that's why I wanted to talk to you about this because
So-
you could speak on it.
Technically, it's basic attention token, but the idea is
Such a catchy name.
Close enough.
the idea is, well, first off, so the Brave browser was actually created by Brandon Ike, which I believe Brandon Ike. He was the one who built the Mozilla Firefox browser. So
wow.
this is a credible
Good guy.
establishment. This is a credible business. There's a lot of companies that are unfortunately fly by night because with crypto there's so much wealth and people are just kind of jumping on the train and writing white papers and creating things that are completely fictional. But what really is interesting about this concept is it's kind of something that I think as a company like El Toro we are striving to combat fraudulent activity through the ad networks, and this is a different take on solving that problem, right? We want to try to get rid of the wasteful ad spend, more targeted ads. We also want to eliminate waste and fraud. And this is a new concept that they're trying to essentially find a fix, because I don't think there's ever going to be a 100% answer to combating fraud completely, right? There's always
Yeah.
going to be, where there's money to be made in doing something fraudulent, people will go to great lengths to make that money, especially with how much money there is at stake every year in advertising. And with some of the problems that they're looking to solve, it's trying to create a different reward system to fight the types of people that would ultimately look to game the system by not making it as enticing for them. And there's different incentive structures. So, if you're browsing on the Brave browser, you are rewarded with your time on a publisher's website, which is rewarded in those tokens, which then can be used to redeem for actual real life money, because you can trade that to any other cryptocurrency ultimately and literally monetize that. So you're monetizing your time.
Yeah.
Right.
It's built on Ethereum, right?
Yeah, so that's another conversation for another time. But quickly on Ethereum, it's a blockchain, if you will, but it's essentially a Turing complete programmable blockchain. So you can actually build smart code
Some
or
big
smart
words.
yeah
Seriously.
smart contracts that will execute based on certain mechanisms
Yeah.
that you can code into it. Right. It's literally the reason why. And obviously, I work for El Toro is technology fascinates me, and whenever you talk about something that literally sounds sci-fi, it's pretty cool, and I think that it's worth trying to understand, because then what are we all doing here anyways? But so the idea is we all spend time browsing the web already. The way that it works now is you have your behemoths like Google and Facebook, who basically take the majority of all the dollars from the advertiser, leaving the publisher with very little. And ultimately, the user suffers because their experience is very poor. The targeting mechanisms are poor. There's a lot of fraud that happens that affects not only the advertiser, but it affects a lot of people downstream from that as well. So what they're trying to do is build a better system that not only ultimately provides a better service in terms of web browsing for the consumer, more privacy-centric. They're also trying to reduce that same fraud. So in the same sense where you can go to a website and you'll see 20 ad placements, you'll maybe see one or two on the Brave browser, right? So less clutter, there's less load times, and people are less likely to want to game that because you can't make as much money, right? If you're a fraudster and you're looking to make more money, you want to try to,
You want a wide
It's in
vein.
volume.
You want a wide vein, exactly.
Yeah.
So you want to make sure that you can game it to try to steal as much money as possible from the advertiser.
So this is this is super relevant to like digital advertising.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
Straight up.
Absolutely.
Well, I mean, before my head explodes.
A lot of big words.
I've read an article on this here recently as well, and I think we should probably take a little bit of a bourbon break here,
Yes.
mainly because my
my head's
glass
spinning,
is turned up dry, and so today we're actually sipping on a little bit of bullet bourbon from Diageo. And this is a 90 proof spirit, so it's a little bit milder proof-wise than a lot of the other bourbons out there. The previous bourbon that we've sampled here on the podcast, 1792, for those of you who don't recall. And to me, and I don't read tasting notes. I don't really care what people tell me it's supposed to taste like. I know what I taste. I know what I like. I drink a lot of Bullet. So for the record, we are not sponsored by Bullet Bourbon.
But we could be. We could be.
Just give us a shout out there, Diageo. However, I love this stuff. I drink it often. This is what I currently am sipping on in my house. When I drink this, I taste a little bit of vanilla as it's going down. I think it's pretty oaky. I like that.
Very tasty. Very tasty.
Yeah.
I like this.
And we're sipping on it neat here, so it's not like we're cutting it. I mean, heck, if I did need to cut it, I mean, I can add my own water to bourbon. I'm not a child.
So did you guys know that? So the bourbon, or the Bullet bourbon, like the bottle, so the label is always sideways.
Yeah, they purposefully do that.
Yeah, they purposely do that because they used to just, back in, when was this bourbon? When was it?
Beats the heck out of me. I mean, it looks like a medicinal bourbon bottle from
it's
like
a really
Prohibition.
old bourbon.
It is good
and
for
they used
you.
to just slap the label on. That's what they used to do. So now I heard one of your friends from Sour
He's
Mash
actually
Tour-
going to be a guest on our podcast here. Andy Hunefeld from Sour Mash Tours. He was dropping some knowledge bombs on us.
he told me that now, actually, if they put the label on straight, they take it off and they put it sideways.
Yeah.
Like
Oh,
it's
wow.
like their brand.
No, that's exactly right.
Wow.
It's pretty cool. Yeah. Pretty
I guess it
interesting.
gives it a little bit more of a crafty feel.
Jared's dropping knowledge on crypto. I'm dropping knowledge on
Bourbon, yeah.
bullet,
All right,
bullet brands.
Thank God we could get a little bit more bourbon in our system to get into further technical conversation. But I mean, so I kind of get the purpose of this new coin. I kind of get the purpose of this new browser. And my apologies if I sound naive to everybody out there, but it's just supposed to help ensure a better likelihood of serving ads to real people. It's another mechanism out there, but and personally, I think this is a fantastic concept. You change the pricing structure, you own the currency for it. I mean, all of this is from a standpoint of somebody like creating a technology and owning that technology. That's a really attractive concept to me. But I think we'd be a bit naive to kind of not recognize that there's significant issue, kind of transferring. Go ahead and use a new browser. I mean, it took me, I'm one of those people. It's like, I'm not going to give Google any more of my information. I already give them so much. Dude, I was on Firefox. I was one of like the last, Firefox or Safari holdouts out there. It took me forever to move over to Chrome, but it's, I finally gave in.
I actually use Safari now because of you, interestingly enough. I use
very
Safari.
good.
If I don't have to do something related to Chrome because of their apps, I use Safari. I mean, it's so different in terms of load times.
That's an interesting point though, because I'm a lot younger than you guys, and like I've just kind of accepted the idea that all these like Google Chrome and these people are just taking my data, and like I'm just
And
like,
they know
whatever.
everything about
with it,
Chrome.
I just don't really care. Yeah. I mean, it might be a generation gap. That might be a real thing.
Yeah, well, I mean,
really don't
just
care.
for full disclosure, I got about a decade on Kramer, and I think Jared and Oz here are probably in the same boat.
Yeah.
But yeah, I'm not that cool with giving up my data, and I don't know why. I'm just, if I have the capacity to be private, I will.
Yeah.
I figure one day when I retire, man, I'm not going to use email anymore because I can.
I think it's just because I've just been using like Facebook ever since it wasn't like I adopted this technology. It was just kind of native with it. I
It was
just
just
born.
normal.
I was just
It was just what everyone did.
I'm just kind
So
of
you do it.
they have my data. I know that.
Yeah.
Whatever.
I think the idea is, for me at least, and with this concept, and I agree with what Styler said 100%. It's very hard to get people to change off an ecosystem that they're used to, whether, or knock them off their habit of what they're accustomed to doing. It's almost automatic that somebody goes to Google and looks up something before they, navigate to the website even. We're kind of entering that kind of world where that's your portal, if you will. If you remember back to, I still remember going to AOL.com and searching a site, or going to Yahoo as my search portal. And literally the reason I started
Find
using
it,
Google,
Lycos.
Yeah, Lycos. Yeah, Ask Jeeves. And I would go to Google, and I remember simply because when it was first, this is really before Google was as big as it was, because it was simple. You'd go to it, and it's still to this day. Search.
Google.
That's all you see. There's nothing else. There's no clutter.
Man,
there's
you
no
guys are
information.
dinosaurs.
When I saw this new browser, I was like, okay, I get it. It's going to help the publisher get rewarded.
Yep.
Helping keep a lot of fraud off their system. It obviously helps the advertiser, but from a user standpoint, and I see that it says that it rewards the user, but I find that very thin. If you came to me and said, "Hey, I'll give you, $100 to change banks," dude, screw you. I don't need that money. $100 is $100, and that's a lot of money. But man, I'm not gonna change my bank because of that. And I feel the same way about my browser. I've got all my passwords stored, in a LastPass plugin on Chrome or in Chrome. I went full bore when I do it. I don't go halfway. But I kind of see quite a few barriers to entry to this, and not to be a pessimist, I don't see this taking off. And I'm obviously not the dude that designed Mozilla originally. Like I'm not trying to make myself sound smarter than the average bear, but man, I think that's a monumental task to get people.
What are
to
your
do
thoughts,
that.
Jared? Because I know you talk a lot about looking into the future of how blockchain is going to literally affect all of our lives. What are your thoughts?
Yeah, I think in certain industries, I think people go overboard with any new technology, right? It's not a cure-all. It's not a panacea for all of our ills and worries. But I think in certain industries, it's absolutely going to revolutionize certain things. Supply chains, I think it's going to revolutionize banking, obviously, as one of the largest ones. Ethereum has a lot of different interesting ideas, some that are kind of really far out still, and I don't think that people will truly understand it until another 20 years from now. But if you look back even to the beginning of the internet, no one probably today thought 20 years ago we'd all be consuming most of our content on watching Netflix and Hulu. Like no one I know has cable anymore. True. Right? Back then, but guess what? Everyone had cable, everyone had TV. That's all they did. So I think those things can happen very quickly within and I think those cycles are happening faster. People's acceptance toward this technology is happening faster. Every time I go out, I see more and more people with smartphones, whether it's old people, young people. Everyone has one, right? It's the barrier to entry becomes a lot lower. But in terms of someone switching over to this browser, I think it really depends on what the market is willing to accept or what the user is willing to accept. There's been a lot of issues with security of data. There's been a lot of issues with how advertisers and how big corporations like Facebook and Google are using their data and whether they think that they should have that much power. I think the concept behind the Brave browser is that they're trying to give more power back to the user and saying, hey, your data is yours, your time is valuable, and we think that you should be compensated for your time. And advertisers would much more likely have a conversation with you directly than having to go through all these third parties. And as you know, in the ad tech world, there's so many different types of SSPs and DSPs and DMPs and more acronyms than you could ever want. And that's where, unfortunately, that's where all the fraud happens, is there's so many middlemen that it gets to be kind of incestuous. So yeah. That's the idea. I think that if people really care about certain aspects of their online privacy, then that might matter. But ultimately, the market decides that, and people will decide that. And whether it's worthwhile or not is yet to be seen. But it would have to be a pretty strong reason, again, to get them to switch. It depends on how much money we're talking. Advertising is a huge industry. And if advertisers can spend their money more effectively and users can be more happy, then I think we'll see a change. But the way the system works right now is that, unfortunately, the internet is free because of advertising, and it's basically paid on the backs of advertisers. That's why you don't have to go to Wall Street Journal, and if you don't want to be paying a subscription monthly, then you have to see ads, and that's just how it works.
Yeah, I never really thought of it that way. Yeah.
And I mean, I also there were. I mean, I'm sure a lot of folks know that there was a recent downturn in the cryptocurrency market here recently over the past few days. What was it, like a 10% dip in valuation?
Oh, yeah. I mean, we're talking 40% the last month.
There was an article in Yahoo about suicides and depression and all this other kind of stuff that was being brought about because people had leveraged themselves so heavily into cryptocurrency that
people are on watch.
They lost their butts.
Yeah, I mean, I think a part of it is 100% true. I mean, the market has with any great rise in the market, and you're talking, looking back to where I look from, I'm looking at from when I initially started getting into Bitcoin at $200. So to me, 200 to 6,000, what it's at, 6,800, I'm still fine with that.
Crushing it.
It all depends, right? It's all relative.
You got in at $200?
Yeah, that's when I started buying.
Wow.
Can I get $1?
I started buying Ethereum at 10.
Man, what's your net worth, man?
200 something. So
dude, I bet.
Bill Gates over here.
Ladies and gentlemen, this is Jared Paris. He's one of the most eligible bachelors in Louisville, Kentucky. I am sure he is rich.
We'll just go ahead and I will completely leave that up to just random dumb luck and just being very interested in this kind of emerging technology that, for all we know, could be completely a farce and go away in the next few years. But I think it's like anything else. Markets move in cycles. They're starting to see, cryptos are not a currency, right? By the government, they are not. They're a commodity. And ultimately, you see these similar cycles happening in other commodity markets. So it behaves very similar to other financial instruments. So I think it's cyclical. I think that these kind of hype trains come and go. Two of the big factors, I think, leading up to why we saw such a major pullback was, so first off, there was a ban across both of the two giants. So Google and Facebook both banned the advertising of cryptos because, unfortunately, there's a lot of bad actors. They're putting out things that are quite literally.
I didn't know that. Huh.
Yeah, they banned
That's
it.
interesting.
They banned it for the last probably
I
basically
didn't know
last
they banned it.
4
I know
months.
there's some
You remember
jokers
that?
out
There was a guy that came into the office that wanted us to kind
He might
of
listen to this.
back his crypto, and I was like, "You are
Jared talked to
this
that
is
guy.
ludicrous." I talked to that guy.
What was the name of it?
I wasted.
let's not drop names.
No, that
but
was
Jared,
I wasted 40 minutes listening to this dude wax. on
Terrible.
It was terrible.
Yeah.
he was here for what, like 2 weeks? I remember this guy.
No,
that
but
was
he
a
brought in
friend
a
of that
buddy.
guy,
Yeah, it was a
yeah.
buddy of his
Yeah.
that it was.
There's a lot of charlatans.
Moving on.
Unfortunately. Yeah, and with these types of emerging technologies, I mean, it's just what it is. I mean, it attracts people. There's a lot of money at stake. It plays to everybody's. Again, greed is the motivator here, which is ultimately why I think it's going to last, and why I tell people, I'm like, look, ultimately, people are greedy, and if they can make money doing something and they can justify it, it might exist. Like these types of things can go on for a very long time just off the back of that. But I do think there's legitimate technology behind it. Ultimately, the market pulled back in a healthy fashion. You can't expect something to rise 2, 3, 4, 5,000, in some cases 10,000%, in a year. And not have it pull back. If it doesn't, then there's something wrong. And I think it's a symptom of a larger problem. I think we're going to see, just globally, even in traditional markets and securities, we're going to see a pullback. We're already starting to see that in China right now. Their real estate market's starting to wind down. We're starting to see, obviously, in other cases, other countries that are, collapsing. Their currency is collapsing. So I think there will be more of these kind of bubbles and bursts, and we'll see that either eventually go on to maturity, or eventually it'll just completely die. But ultimately, that's kind of where I look at it. But I'm in it for the long run. I think the technology is solid. So, my stance is I'm just going to keep following it, and I find it interesting. So
Yeah.
Hey, that's cool, man.
That's
and I
super
mean,
cool.
you told me that you believe that people will eventually have to own cryptocurrencies to transact business through many, I guess, verticals or industries or things of that nature.
Absolutely.
And I think that's something that, I kind of take away from owning cryptocurrencies. I dabbled heavily in, late summer 2017, got out very quickly, fortunately.
Not for the faint of heart.
But I still hold some because I really do believe that. And, I think that you kind of have to have a little bit of assets like that. You might as well keep a little bit of silver around just in case the dollar's not worth a damn
Absolutely.
thing tomorrow.
Yeah, Jared got me to buy some.
Yeah, straight up.
Just broke up with a girl, and I was like depressed. I had some money. I was like, shoot, let's just try this.
worst advice
What's
you
the
could
worst?
take.
I'm not taking anybody out to dinner.
Jared's
I
like-
might as well buy some
Jared's
cryptos.
like, hey man, you should put that money in Bitcoin and
Get
Ethereum.
them hustle.
I was
bucks.
like, this guy, he knows what he's talking about.
Let me preface
Sure
this.
enough.
I'm not a financial expert. I do not give advice on what you should buy or not buy. And ultimately, it's funny though. Really, what I tell people when they're interested, I said, look, I'm not going to tell you to buy it. I'm going to tell you to go and research it and read about it and understand. Just try to understand some of the implications of what it could be. And if it makes sense to you, then you'll buy it. I don't have to sell you on it because ultimately it's a concept really to this point, and it's becoming more and more like a financial instrument. But if you don't see the value in it, then don't buy it. I mean, at the end of the day, how many people, I can probably tell you how many people said they would never own a smartphone. And guess what? They all own smartphones.
Yeah.
because
Not
they
me.
have to.
I'm rocking a Motorola
phone.
Never
StarTAC.
mind.
Fake
Nokia.
news, man.
He's got the beeper.
Salarins. I know you own. What do you have? iPhone X.
Oh, dude, yeah, I got the
Fake
biggest and baddest iPhone I can get.
Awesome.
So the moral of the story is Jared says buy Bitcoin, Ethereum.
Yeah,
Listen to Jared. Buy
get all
Bitcoin.
the credit cards you can because
Yes.
the market is hot.
That's awesome.
Leverage debt, buy cryptos, bet the house.
Timing is everything, folks. Timing is everything.
Awesome.
Sell your dog.
Well, cool guys. That's awesome. So next week we're gonna have the one and only Mark Jurich. Mark Jurich is coming on. Talk about the Jurich Group.
Exciting, man.
Find out
Yeah,
some
love
hot
it.
details going on in Louisville.
Yeah, buddy. Jared, thanks for joining us on the podcast today.
Yeah, it's a pleasure, man. Thanks for having me. It's really interesting and fun to talk about the crypto space, so I'm always down for it.
Awesome. Well, thank you for listening to the third episode of the El Toro Podcast. We will see you here next Friday.
You've been listening to the Straight from the Bull podcast from El Toro Studios, brought to you by eltoro.com, where we target people, not pixels.